Hey friends, Heath Home here. Welcome to another Sunday Funday live stream with Ableton Live. Today I'm going to be sharing with you techniques for working with samples, loops and one-shots. I'll be showing you some creative ways we can use them, and most importantly, how to make them your own, avoiding the main reason most music producers shy away from working with them, as they don't want to sound like everybody else. I'll explain what I'm doing along the way, so whether you're completely new to music production and Ableton Live, or you're a seasoned pro, I'm sure there will be key takeaways for everyone in today's stream. In the end, the goal is to inspire you to fire up Ableton and make some music. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. And so without further ado, let's dive in. Now, you won't see my screen, but I did write just a little bit more notes for today's video, just a couple of things. So talking about this subject of samples and sample packs, and whether we should use them or whether we shouldn't use them. Is it taboo? These kind of subjects, because teaching a lot of people, working with a lot of students over the years, coaching, etc., I often hear discussions and I see people talking about it online, that it's not cool. Perhaps there's some shame in using samples. Perhaps there's a stigma attached to using them. So let's start with a question that I often ask people, like, what is audio? And often I see, when I ask this question into a room full of people, a lot of blank faces. And the way I think about audio as a source, it's a source material for music production. It's either recorded sound or a reproduced sound. So for example, if we're thinking of it as a recorded sound, I think that's quite easy to understand. If it's a reproduced sound, it's something where, for example, when we're using a VST in Ableton Live on a MIDI track, that is reproducing audio at the end of the VST. What's coming out is an audio output. So that's an example there. Sound generally being recorded to tape or a computer, via a microphone. So sound is going to be important here, as the samples, the loops, the sample packs I'm talking about, we're going to be working with audio as the source. Here's a couple of things. Do your listeners, do they know or care whether you have used samples or not? I think mainly it's other producers that might understand if you just grab this sample from this pack and just put it in your track, as they're the ones that are likely to understand that. I don't believe the listeners, that is the music listeners out there, probably know whether it came from Kind of Music sample pack or somebody else's. Is writing everything in your track using only VSTs or instruments, software or hardware, is that cooler, better, more original? Question mark. I'm not so sure that you could clearly answer that it is. It's definitely another way to work. I love working that way. Myself, I like having all options on the table. So what are some of the advantages of working with audio, samples, one-shots, loops, and packs? Adding a musical part, track, instruments you're simply unable to create, program at this point in time in your music journey. So that's great when you're a beginner starting out your music production journey, because maybe that baseline is unachievable at this point in time, but you can reach for a sample and that answers that question for you. What else do we have? Well, adding elements of the real world into your project is a great way to work with samples. And again, audio, you can bring an organic component to your track. A real piano recorded with a microphone is a real piano, and it's recorded in that room and it has a unique sound to it because of that. That's a source material I want to use, and hopefully you out there also are interested in that. We can record real world sounds, acoustic sounds, human sounds, nature, industrial, and the list goes on. There are artists out there who rely very heavily on audio as the source of their work. I can think of some such as Fortet, Bonobo, Tourist. It's part of their aesthetic, their signature sound, their unique, distinct sound. the storytelling that's part of their track. Perhaps they recorded the audio and the samples in the environment they're living in, so the story is living in their music about where they produce the music, or they're on holiday and things like that. Do professional producers use sample packs? The answer is yes. They're a valuable resource for professionals and beginners. They can be the spark you need to get a new idea going, or perhaps complete the missing puzzle in an existing project. So in the end, sorry about this rant, but hopefully you find it interesting and useful. In my view, samples and audio is just another source material to work with. The key thing that I want to show you today is why samples tend to get a bad rap is, of course, there's a lazy way to use them, and then there's a way where we can learn how to kind of take them and make them our own. And that's the direction I would encourage you to kind of take away from today's video. And I'm going to put it into two levels: the basic things we can do, and then let's say quite some more advanced things we can do to try and make samples that came from a pack or Ableton Suite our very own. So to me, as I said, it's just another source material to work with, and it opens up some excellent doors, so bring it on. Let's get started then. Let's crack on. So everything you kind of see in the window today, it's mainly for me to remind me. There's not really anything we are particularly kind of getting too big a head start here. It's kind of notes to remind me of things to explain and look at. So we're going to start with, as I said, kind of more or less working with samples and audio, and some of the basics things we can do right off the bat. I'm just going to have a quick check of my audio, so I'm just going to play something in this follow actions group over here, which I will be explaining when I get to the advanced section, because we're going to have a play with what you can do with follow actions. So it looks good my end. We definitely have an audio output, which is great. Hopefully that's working on YouTube in the live stream. And if you are with me in the live stream and you don't have a question, that's fine. Drop a hello in the chat. Say hello to somebody else. Let us know you're there. Let us know where you're coming from, what you're doing with your music, what genres you like. It'd be amazing to hear that. Right, so that's kind of looking good. So let's say we're going to kick off a new track idea. Let's set a tempo of something like 124 BPM. So we'll try to make something that's kind of not just pure sound design, something that has a bit of a track feel to it, so we can kind of also look for a bass line and this element and this element, and then work our way to a bit of an idea. Maybe we do a couple of ideas. Let's see how that goes. I'm going to mainly work with not the sample packs I have, but again, Ableton Live Suites packs. That way you can also get access to these samples, so you will only need to have Ableton Live Suite. And of course, then you can open up the pack section of the browser and you can download lots of these packs and then use the same samples that I'm going to be working with. So let's say we do a Command F. So we open up the browser up the top here to all, then we click packs, and then we click loop, and then we start looking for a particular element of the track for today. So maybe we start with something like, well, let's say a bass line perhaps. So we click on the bass here, which opens up, you know, these are all the bass loops available here. Chavi dias, good afternoon, muy buenas tardes. Ojalá todo es bien en Suecia, aquí bastante calor en Ibiza. Okay. So let's have a little look through, preview some samples here. We're going to be looking for something that appeals to us. We'll look for something that's like a groovy loop. Okay, so this could be one already. So let's have that acid groove up and drop it on this empty audio track over here. Let's just see if we've got something else. They're all nice. We've already got an acid one, so let's try and move on, find something else. That's also rather cool. So let's have those two. So we've grabbed a couple of loops here. One thing we will need to kind of, which when you're starting out your music production journey, perhaps things like keys and scales are a little bit new to you at this point in time. Something that you would probably want to develop over time is understanding that when you're looking at these loops, if they are marked with a key and a tempo, then that's very useful information, because perhaps today's idea, we just do everything in A, and therefore everything would have a common key and a glue musically, right? If you have some advanced knowledge, then no problem at all mixing keys, an A with a B and a C with a D. But if you don't understand that already, perhaps try and choose samples that have a matching key, and therefore things will sound in key together with each other. Otherwise, you're relying on a very good ear, and if you have a very good ear, that's amazing, because then obviously you can also mix and match keys and just rely on your hearing to tell you if something works with something else. But again, it's up to you. I'm going to try and help you by sort of choosing something that's going to make sense musically. Jay Francisco, hi. Ableton volume is a bit low, I think. Okay, interesting. Yeah, it probably was quite low on that track before, Jay Francisco, because there wasn't really much on it. So hopefully now, if we play this loop here, that should be a lot more kind of punchy, I would imagine. And just in case, we'll pop a little limiter on the master track. Maybe just have it somewhere around here, but it was just that the thing I played before, just as a test, it didn't really have any particular volume to it. So okay, so hopefully that's good. In fact, I'm going to turn the limiter off because we don't really need it there, I don't think. So let's try the other bass loop. We know we've got these two loops. Okay, so what can we do with that? What can we do with that? We've sort of dragged it over, we've chosen it from the browser, we've plonked it on this track here. Thanks, Jay Francisco, appreciate that. Yeah, I thought so. It's just that my little tester track before was the low volume, so good to know. Thanks, mate. Appreciate the comment there. So, you know, this is the thing where we're starting, really. We've chosen something from the browser, we've chopped on an empty audio track. Now, let's say the lazy way here would be just to leave it as it is, and that would be in our track as a bass line exactly as it is. We can adjust the volume. We can, of course, add effects so we can process things. I need to remind myself to keep this tab open, so if I close it, please tell me, because you're going to be wanting to see what's going on over here shortly. So, you know, we're going to mix the volume, we're going to balance the volume. We could add some, you know, delay to this just using the sends, and we could also add effects to it. But let's see what we can do inside the clip itself. So if we open up the bass, it's nice. It's kind of like a live guitar bass. So if you have watched some of my previous videos, you've probably seen me little by little unveil some of these techniques as I've been going along, as I use them myself all the time. So I've been showing some of these in little slithers, bits and pieces. So what we want to do is come down the bottom here and open up the audio tab. And in this area here, we can see that we could play around with the warping and the algorithms on this side. We've also got a knob where we can repitch the bass. So again, if you know music theory, what is 3 semitones above the A, then you could, in this case it's a B, sorry, in the title of the bass. So we would now have repitched the bass to, put the answer in the chat, D. So, you know, it can be good to learn those things, right? So you can repitch it down here. You can also reverse things directly in here by clicking here, and this can sound really nice as a variation in your track, where you might duplicate the bass down and have a version that's reversed and a version that's playing in its normal direction. So now we've got, now that might sound really weird, but it could actually sound really good. It just depends what you're doing with it, right? We're going to stick with the straight one. As I said, we're just going through the very basics of what we can do. So down here, there's some basic options where we can already play around a little bit. One that's really underrated and overlooked is when we go through this loop here. Straight away, we could see up the top here, well, of course, we could re-loop this bass, right? So at the moment, it's 8 bars. We could actually just say that we only want our bass line to be just in this area here. And we could make a longer loop or a shorter loop. So let's make it longer. And then we could just drag this around. there's all sorts of fun kind of... So once again, you know, if you were doing a track here and you were thinking about scenes and variations, I could go through this clip and loop up different sections. So I quite like that loop. I could duplicate it down, and then in the second clip, I might go somewhere else, and now I've got a change in the same audio baseline that I could switch, right, in my track. All right, so there's one there, and then I could and bounce between those two, right? So that's kind of a cool thought process to get. But let's come back to the first one. So I could, you know, loop it up somewhere different. That should be fairly clear. But what's even more interesting, or what's another thing that's rather interesting that people overlook? So first of all, we can look into here and try and find something from it that isn't currently there. Then we can actually move our start point here. Okay, so where is the loop going to trigger from? And we can say we move it somewhere else within this loop. So it's not going to play back from the same point that it's currently playing back from. That's going to give us all sorts of possibilities, because look how many notes we have here where we could start playback from. And if you want to move the notes in different divisions, then just change up here in your right hand corner the clip size, right? So we're in 8 bars and we've got 16th notes. Every one of these lines is a 16th note here in here. And if we want to change that, we can use Command 1 and 2. That's the shortcut to do that on a Mac. Control 1 and 2 to change the grid size. So now we'd be moving the playhead. It will snap to 8th notes, right? Before it was going to snap to 16th notes. So I hope that kind of makes sense. So let's play around with that a little bit and let's move our start point. So I'm going to duplicate it down so we can do a comparison again. What has that changed? Let's put the yellow one back to the start where it was originally looping around. Hear how that's kind of a quite different timing. So again, we've got another variation of the clip that we could use in our track, going from this bass to this bass, but we can also now start working with it in a different position, and that gives us, what it's doing is kind of changing the accents. So sometimes in a drum loop, we can look at this in a bit, it would be changing like where the accents are in the drum groove, so you're completely switching kind of the feeling of the loop and changing the timing. And that's a simple thing, right? You can just pop a loop in, change the loop length, move the sample playhead, and you've suddenly got something completely new. And then we've also got all these things like repitching it that we looked at a moment ago, reversing it, and we're at the tip of the iceberg. We're not even anywhere deep yet whatsoever. So let's say we've got this new timing on this bass here. I'm going to move the yellow one away, but hopefully you're getting my point that this should help you also think about making variations in audio, because it's not that tricky to come up with clip A, clip B, clip C, and onwards, right? So we've got a new timing or new accenting of this clip. All right, let's get a bit more sophisticated. I mean, if we want to change it over here, as you've already heard, we could now come back here and let's change it to beats, and let's use the preserve transients to kind of put it with no preservation, and then we can use this box, kind of change the feeling. So all these little transient markers up here, Ableton's kind of like preserving those markers and kind of chopping away a lot of the sound as we come down here, just leaving those transients, right? So in here you've got a lot of adjustment as well, and you could also change to another mode. Something like texture could be really interesting. right? Because things can start to get quite weird with texture. So if you're really looking to mangle something, that might be the answer there. So let's leave it kind of pretty standard over here for now. I like pitch down 4 semitones. Again, if you want to go onto your keyboard, the sample is B. So we've now gone where? We've gone, and if you want to look, we could open up a MIDI track next door, pop in the piano roll. We're currently here on B, right? So if we count ourselves down, let's get ourselves the B3. We've gone down 4 semitones. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're on the G, which is nice. So if we're going to stay in a scale, that's a white note. It's in the white note scales of A minor and C major. So that could be a good decision there, right? But I just set that with my ear, but now I can go over here if I'm learning and check that out. By the way, if you're looking for advanced techniques, we are going there, but this is nice perhaps for a lot of you to see just kind of the basics we can do, how we can be already imaginative right from the get-go. All right, so I've got this pitch down here. I might put it back for a moment. Let me do another duplicate because I do like that. I'm going to save one with that. But in the one we're working in, I'm going to reset it to 0. Reason being that the next thing I'm going to do is open up the envelopes over here, just by Sample Envelopes tab. And when we open that up, we can see down the bottom here, we've got these boxes that open up in the bottom left corner. And if we open up, we've got 2 options on the left-hand box. We could either be making modulation or automation of the mixer or the clip. And in the right-hand box, the options depend on what you've got selected here, either the mixer or the clip. I don't want the mixer at this point in time. If you choose the mixer here, you're making decisions in this clip to do with this panel here. Not really much to do with the audio. You're playing around with panning and volume and the send and returns. That's not really what I want to show you here. We're trying to make changes to this sample. So we want clip. And then if we look here, great, what can we change in the clip? We can change its gain, volume. We can change the pitch inside of the clip. This is brand new in 12. Amazing. What I was just doing over here can now be controlled in 12. So we'll see that in a moment. So we can actually create our own custom transient envelope in here, because what I was doing before was with the mouse, right? So if I'm playing it like this, and I go back here, I'm moving my mouse, right? Well, now you can actually create your own automation in the clip that's going to do exactly that, but it's going to follow along the clip. So that is pretty damn cool in my opinion. So we've got these fun things. So we're going to go through a few of them. We're not going to do everything. Also, what changes in the background here, grain size and flux, they're grayed out. That's because we're currently in beats. So beats gives me the transient envelope. If I change it to, for example, texture, and then we go back over here, we'll see the transient envelopes grayed out, but grain size and flux are now bold. So, you know, the ones that are grayed out, they are tied to one of the other warp algorithms, right? We're going to stick to beats for now. That allows us to use the transient envelope. But let's start with gain, one of my favorites, again in here. If I turn on my pencil tool on my keyboard, B, okay, I can now kind of draw in here. And right at the very top, we've got this light blue dotted line that's connected to that clip and gain. What I quite like to do sometimes is just draw the pencil down like so. And again, it's going to snap to the 16ths at the moment. See that? Right? So if we don't want that to be happening, then we either change the grid size again, or if we do hold command with our pencil on a Mac, you can freehand, right? The grid goes off in the background. So just something to remember there as well. If you want that behavior, you can turn the grid off, but you can also just hold Control or Command down and draw in freehand. So what's the advantage of this? Well, the advantage is if we start with everything off and we now push play, we've got nothing, right? But that then means that now we can reveal the notes we'd like to reveal. Let's start making our own little custom bass line here. Don't want that one. right? So this is great because it has a twofold kind of two things that are going on here. Something, if you can wrap your head around, it means that when you're layering lots of audio in your track or loops like this, you can carve space for other elements to own those parts of the track, so that therefore these elements here are not going to be playing and something else can be playing in another loop, and that's going to make your mix and track and everything work together and be much more powerful, more interesting. So if you can put that in the bank for doing that, it's already great for that. Secondly, or probably more importantly, I've just customized this bass loop into a completely new pattern. What I've done just with my ear, without really consciously thinking about it, is I've kind of left space for the kick, because normally in the music I write, there's a kick here, 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 there's one here, so there would be an overlap there, but I've actually carved out space for the kick drum. So what do I mean by that? Let's have a kick over here. Let's maybe put the MIDI track there, and let's just throw in, I'm not going to do a sort of kick loop demonstration from a sample pack in audio, as there's not really much to gain from that. This bass line and drum grooves and pads and things like that, you're going to learn a lot more from. A kick loop, really, there isn't much I would do to it other than choose a nice one and drop it in, right? It doesn't have the same customization to it. So we're just going to have the DS kick over here, drop in a quick 4/4 pattern. Right, now sometimes when we do this, like if we go over to our original bass, or the copy I've got, that's the pitch down one that I did, that I quite like. This is the one we're working on at the moment. Now it sounds a bit choppy, as it is choppy, right? But we can refine that a little bit. So by turning on your pencil tool, you kind of like make these obviously quite sharp, glitchy cuts. And that can be great, because sometimes you actually really want that. And you can get, again, really fancy with the sound design here. If we make a very small grid like this, you can even do like really special kind of like really small notches like this, right? And you can get actually a really glitchy feel. It's not so easy to do sometimes. Try like that. So, you know, you can actually be aiming for more glitch, right? But in this case, I'm kind of not looking for that. I just wanted to change the bass pattern around a bit. So now that I've kind of drawn those pencil slices, let's say, whatever's gray is we're not hearing, and what's under the blue we're hearing, I can now turn the pencil tool off, and I can see the automation points, and I can click them away, and I can kind of adjust them a little bit. So we're kind of fading this down from that point, and you can go right in and make sure that there's no pops and clicks. So that's kind of the idea here, right? Getting rid of any pops and clicks, things like that. So we kind of clean this up. Let's say we do this one out, right, all the way over there, and we make sure that the samples start when it comes in, there's nothing nasty there. Let's take this one out as well. This one, we probably can come right over to that slice there, just like that. So we back right up against the start of that slice, pop it down again like this, keep going along. This one also, we can come a little bit closer to the slice. It's more sort of there. Great. And then our last one over here, let's pop that out. Now also, at the very top up here, it says 100% when I hover under that line. That is gain. Remember, we're doing down here clip and gain, so it's volume. So also, if you want any of these hits, this is another very cool mixing thing, that if you do isolate these hits like this, then you can turn something down. So you might do just one of these, like volume, where you actually, perhaps I'll give you an example so you can understand what I mean, but you can actually, so these two hits here, we could hover under that line and we would be turning those hits down. So every time it plays through, let's make them even quieter. We go right down to 50%. Right? So you've also got that level of control, which could be great, because this audio might be something like a vocal take or a piano or something. Maybe there's a real spike there, whereas there's a note that's kind of bothering you and bothering your ear. Great, you can go into this envelopes, into the clip, into the gain, just pull it down a little bit. What's next? Well, let's hear how glitchy it sounds. quite glitchy because obviously now I cut that square off into this kind of triangle. Because what I'm going to do now is what you need to do is just hover your mouse below the breakpoints, right? So whenever you hover your mouse below one of these modulation lines, you see how it changes color? I'm just hovering the mouse there. And if I hover it there and then hold Alt or Option key on my keyboard, I get this little curve. You'll see it popping alongside the mouse pointer, and just keep that key held. And now I can do that. I can also go the other way, but this is going to sound much more natural because now I'm kind of bringing it back, but I'm able to control that fade in a very nice kind of curved way, right? Which is going to sound quite a lot smoother than the sharp line, the linear versus, in this case, exponential, as we call it. Linear is the straight line. So you can adjust all of those like that as well. Anywhere between the breakpoints can be curved like that. Maybe we open this one up. There we go. So that's pretty cool. We got like something quite interesting there. Could we combine it with what's going on over here that I showed you earlier? Yeah, so we could. Right, so we could absolutely, you know, and this is what I want you to also start thinking about. You can add things to this, combine things, right? So we're doing this technique over here, but we can combine what we saw earlier over there. We could put it in texture mode, we could reverse it, we could pitch it up and down over here, but with the volume, the envelope changes over here, which is happy days. All right, so let's move on to transposition. I'm happy with the gain. I'm staying in the clip. Now I'm on transposition. Well, what does that mean? Well, that's great because what you see here is our broken line again is now in terms of pitch, which is the reason why I've got these two versions, the one where I pitch the whole bass loop down. Now I'm going to show you that we can pitch individual notes up and down, which is a whole different ball game, right? So we know our bass is in B. This one, we don't have the whole bass line hasn't been pitched down, but we're going to go into the clip envelopes again. This time we've got transposition, we've got this broken line, and it's sitting at 0 semitones, which means it's right on the note B. But we can go now between B and the octave higher B at 12 semitones and 24 and anywhere in between. So maybe just a quick reminder of which notes I'm using, like these, right? So just going to remember that I'm going to repitch some of these. Maybe this guy over here would be interesting. Perhaps this one, you know, just getting some of the positions in my head before I go back here. So we know this one is 1. I'm going to use my pencil again, and now you can see I can choose semitones here. So let's say we put this up a 7th, this particular note here. Okay, let's go higher. Let's go all the way to an octave so it's obvious. Let's go 2 octaves. Okay, a bit weird. So maybe we go really low, so it's subtle. Okay, that's cool. We can also go down, by the way. And this bass isn't super low, so maybe try the other way. That's cool. That works better for me, right? And again, if you're not sure about what semitones, are they still in your scale? Open up a MIDI track next door, pop a piano roll there, remember you're in B, and then count yourself up 7 semitones. We're going to try and stay in a white key scale here, so that what I'm doing is kind of going to stay in key at the moment, the semitone intervals I'm choosing. Let's try this guy. I quite like 1 to be up a little bit. There we go. I think it's this guy. Right, that's kind of pretty groovy, right? So that's kind of interesting. And if we turn the pencil tool off, much like the gain envelope, we can now kind of make these, again, a bit more musical if we wish. We can smooth them out, make them kind of, whoops, like a round transition. And that's kind of going to make it almost like a pitch bend. So if I move this over here, you can get this really nice kind of rolling feel to it because you're kind of bending down to these pitches. So we can do all sorts. That actually could be really interesting. All right, so with those two envelopes there, with the changes we've made so far, what do we start with? We change the playhead position, so we're not starting from the 1 in the loop at the moment. I've also re-looped it in the end. I'm not using the full 8 bars, mainly because it was quicker to, work on a section to do what I'm doing here to demonstrate for you boys and girls out there what I'm doing. So obviously I could carry this on into the second half of the loop. The same with the clip gain, right? I'm just working in this sort of first 4 bars. And I've now adjusted both those things, right? The gain and the transposition. Let's maybe do another clip for the, so I like the combination of those two things. Let's do another clip for the transient envelope. So we treat that kind of separate just so you can see what that does. And I also think I'll apply that to a drum groove so you can kind of really get the feel for that. Right, so arguably it's quite original. And what we originally had was, this one's still not the original because it's pitched down. So let's do one without that. And let's put the playhead there, as it would be. So let's say today we use white as originals. Now that's a cool bass. And of course, we could have just plonked it on the track and used it like that. And there's nothing stopping us from carrying on using that in our track. But we could use this as a variation then. Right, but we were kind of going for something that was a bit more minimal, stripped down from that bass. So not so close to what I originally had. And this purple track is closer because it's literally just starting from a new point in the loop and it's globally pitched down the whole bass line instead of using those last two things that I just showed you, right? So the gain and the transposition. So you've got 3 different moves there. Original bass, pitch down with a new start point, and then quite minimal combining these 2 elements. So what I would do with this bass myself is probably add a little bit of delay, so it kind of sounds a little bit sexier between the 2 hits, but I don't want to make it muddy, but we could add a nice little bit of delay to this. So if you added this delay, for example, to the original bass, it gets kind of messy and confusing. But because we've kind of stripped the bass away to something that's much more minimal and only a few notes, that gives us this lovely chance to add some groove. because we've got space between the notes. So we could turn that into something with a little bit of thought and processing. So that's where we were at the start. Nothing wrong, as I said, it's a great bass line, absolutely. But now we've got something that's our own here. Currently, no one has that on their computer. It's just here in this real time in this video, that bass line with those decisions, right? That's what's beautiful about this, and that's what I'm trying to sort of say. There's a way where we can sort of, and once you start this journey of sort of perhaps, as I said, you're new to music production and you are working with loops and samples from Sample Pack, nothing wrong with it whatsoever, but perhaps you can start trying some of these things out and imagining how you can reimagine those loops and turn them into something completely new. There are ways we can get more advanced where we resequence all the hits in this bass line and chop them up and re-stitch it all together into a whole new clip. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. I keep saying that, but it's very much only the tip of the iceberg. But hopefully you saw how easy it was to get get that happening there without too much difficulty. In a reasonably short time, we've got something, as I said, quite original. And now if this was my bass as well, I've added those effects, but if I copied it down again, I might try out some other things here just before, for again a second version of this bass, the one we've sort of chosen. So what we'll need to do is bring the loop over here. So reversing is a bit too weird because it's a very short loop in the end, so we wouldn't go that way. But we could use the preserve transients for sure. And a global repitch as well if we wish. By the way, I've done a few videos where I've gone quite deep into raw, so if you see and hear this device and think, oh, I'd like to understand what that does, I can pop a video here, somewhere here or here, where I've deep dived into this and explained kind of the advantages of using it and what it does. New to 12, amazing device. All right, so that's a little bass line that's now kind of, as I said, unique from the white clip copied down. We can get rid of the purple one as well. That was just a global pitch down with a new playhead position. I'm not going to use that. This is kind of the direction of where I've evolved it to. Just going to pop this back to soft sign so it's a bit cleaner. So let's maybe do one more of these with a similar thing. Let's have a look at the acid bass that I had up here. So maybe we can try another bass line with the same sort of concept. So similar thing, let's say we just loop up the first 9 bars here, or 8 bars should I say. And let's see, this could be very interesting, I believe, if it was reversed, looking at the sort of style of it. Well, let's see what happens if we do that. That could be something. Again, we could, with the first version, loop it up so it's a fast kind of bass like that. So maybe we're making techno. Just with those properties over here, we can really get, you know, something quite interesting from that big loop. We might find another favorite. I really like that loop there, so I might use that as just a single note bass, looping it up like that, but maybe we'll go back, or let's say we undo what I just did there. And you can see, again, even in this small loop, the start point of the loop trigger changes how this whole loop sounds. Super nice there. So maybe we say we like that, copy it down, color the next one, because we're going to look to do something different here. So we've got this small loop. I have pitched again the whole bass line down, which is affecting this particular slice. So let's maybe put it back to 0. And we'll go into the envelopes and we'll go transposition and we'll repitch it in here. Right? And we can jump between the two, right? So we've just made ourselves, again, another outlet in our track for a variation, going from this acid bass line, just hovering on this one note, looping around. So it's really, the limit is your imagination, right? You know, but hopefully looking at these clip tools down here, you can see that just using transmission and gain, you can really take loops and customize them quite fast, along with the envelope properties down here. And that's just very basic, but it actually, as I said, works quite well as a really good starting point to making loops your own. So I quite like this, and again we can, you know, have some processing on it. So this was an acid bass line, it could end up being a melody. So remembering, you know, before, let's copy this back up. By default, we did have a very nice source material. That's the beauty of working with audio and samples. This is a really nice acid synth loop, sounds like this. So let's just turn off let's put this into a little rack or something. Just so we know what it was like in the beginning, right? If we just plonked it in our track, push play, we would be having that. And obviously the producers worked hard to get this nice modulation and automation going on inside the loop, as you can hear. So there's a great bit of source material there to work with, customize it. And here's just a couple of little moves I've done. One where I've looped it up, just on a favorite note, turned it into a very small section, hovering around that. And then repitching this little note individually and then adding a bit of processing afterwards. Right, so yeah, let's maybe choose one of those for this basic idea. So I'm going to add some elements to this sort of, and I'm just going to check over here at my notes. So we're looking at the basic things, envelope changes, changing the start point we've looked at in here, making it play back from a different position in the loop. That shifts the accents of the pattern around. We've not done that yet, so that's something I want to do inside of a drum loop, let's say. We've repitched both the whole bass line, that's with the pitch knob over here on the envelope properties, and then we've individually used the clip transposition to repitch notes within there. And now we've started to combine some of these things where we've been combining things down here with clip modulation or automation. And we didn't record and resample yet, but that's another option where we open up an audio track and record what we're doing into it, and then we go and work on it again. So here's another example, let's say. If we create a brand new audio track next door to this, and we say that we'd like it to listen to the acid groove track, let's just switch it off down here, turn it to in, arm it. And when we're ready, let's have this clip being recorded into here. And we're creating our own brand new bass line, and if we wanted to do some things in real time, we could be. This would be being recorded into that clip. So we could go a long time there doing that, make ourselves a new bass line, which is here. That's what I was just recording. We can now bring that back and drop that over here, get rid of that recording track if we wish. We can label this, what are we going to call it? Our own custom bass for now. And let's maybe have, again, this one in white, so we know it was the original. That's the system I'm kind of using here. And let's have all these as a different color. We'll do the same up here. Oops, wrong one. Also, color coding, naming, it's all going to be helpful here. So let's do a bit of housekeeping so we've got a bit of clarity there. Let's call this the bass loop. Lop, no. Bass loop would help. And these should kind of have, again, typically for me, they might have a 2 or a 3. So I just kind of know that they differ from each other somehow. And generally I give them different colors like that, just so it's kind of clear. So now we've got our custom bass down here. And the funny thing is, what we need to do is switch off this effects as it's already been recorded into that loop in this case. And now we could start that whole process again. Crazy, right? So we can go back through all this. And now we're resampling our own handiwork, like our own audio loop that we just created. So we're no longer with the original loop at all. be back with a little bit of effects. Guess what? We can now open up another audio track. Let's start that process again, right? So I hope I'm inspiring you to sort of see that it's okay to, of course, use loops straight out of the box and pop them in, but this is you know, we're looking at the very basics where we can kind of start taking them into our own territory without too much difficulty, a little bit of imagination and a little bit of practice, and off we go and start building our own, taking, as I said, for me, source material. Currently this bass only exists on this computer, the same as this one, or this one, or this one. So fun as far as I'm concerned, and as I said, the source material was just exactly that. It was, you know, dare I say it, the taboo subject. It was a sample loop, came out of Ableton's packs that come bundled with the suite, but we've now taken it into our own wheelhouse and it belongs to our project at this point in time. So which bass am I going to use to build on this track idea? Let me think about that for a second. Quite like this, so I'm going to kind of use this idea and just add another loop to this, continuing with this as I want to show you the modulate preserve transient, and let's do that with a drum loop. So we want to again get Command F into searching for all packs, loop, turn off the bass, and now we're going to look for, let's say, a perk loop, ideally something that's quite kind of busy. Could be a possibility. Let's just open a new audio track so we can drop them in once we have one. They're all nice, but I want kind of mixed, as I said, would be good. This one, perfect. Okay, so let's start with this one. So again, we've chosen a percussion loop from over there. If we plonk it into our track, hit play. That's what we've got at the moment. We could try some stuff out. Let's say we copy it down so we know at the top we've got an original one. Something I often like to do. Let's try and reverse it, see what that sounds like. Could be interesting. We're going for something super sound effecty. It's quite nice how it's kind of glitchy. Let's try again moving the start point. We're in 16th notes. Again, if we want to change the start point to a different timing, quarters, eighths, and we just need to change the grid size in the background. Interesting. That 100% works as we're shifting quarter beats, but just to a different accent, a different point. So these kind of points like this in the grid, they're going to work because we're literally just shifting the sample start point, but to another one within the bar. So we're starting on the second bar instead of the first. But if we go in between the lines, that's a whole new groove. So we can compare it, right? If we jump up here, original groove, playing off the 1. So let's work with this. And let's do the one type of envelope that I haven't done yet, particularly with the beats mode, and that is the transient envelope, which is great. So we can now, as I said, new in 12, get stuck into what I was doing over here, which is changing the beats transients preserve mode to the arrow that goes straight through, no preservation, and then we use this little box here to create that feeling. But what we can do now is set it up like that here, and then get over to here and start doing it here with this blue line. So let's do it again with our pencil. It's similar to taking the gain down, but different at the same time, because we're kind of still hearing that, what's happening in between what I'm revealing and what's been, the transient's been put right down to 0. This is right down at 0 at the bottom here, and the others are at 100. And then we could also, like, you know, vary all of these. Amazing, really. So you could spend a lot of time here redesigning this whole percussion loop. And again, we can use the method I showed you before. We can add very nice curves, take away breakpoints. So now I'm just kind of turning down the hits I want to turn down, bringing up the ones I want to bring up. Nice. So again, that's a whole custom loop there from what we started with, just playing around with this percussion and the beat transient. And we've also changed the start position. We've got something unique going on here. And we could now create versions of this. So let's give ourselves an original again and some copies. That's an original there. This one's the first one with some adjustment. So let's maybe do something different in this one. So let me say, for example, I'm going to do freehand or something like that. So instead of like the pencil tool and making this kind of pattern that you see in front of us here, I'm going to right click my mouse and clear this envelope. And then I'm going to turn on the pencil, but I'm going to hold down Command on a Mac, and I'm going to draw in this time. So totally different feeling. This is the loop where I drew the pencil that's snapped to the grid. And so far I didn't go and bring in any exponential curves, which you could do as well. Particularly useful, as I said, if you want to go right in and make sure where your sections start and end, so there's no sort of pops and clicks that you don't want to hear. I mean, sometimes it's nice to have a bit of glitchiness, but sometimes you might want a lot cleaner, and this might be the way to go in that way. This one, completely different. Pencil tool, grid off. So we've got this nice custom envelope going on, completely different. Just depends what we're doing. I think the acid base is a better fit. All right, so that's kind of a little idea there of basically using some basic parameters to get a standard loop from a sample pack and turn it into something that only is living in your project and only in your computer. And I can't stress enough that hopefully that's inspired you to do that and shown you some ways that you can do that. Again, it's tip of the iceberg. You know, we can add more effects to those things. We can continue copying them down and making adjustments. As I said, we could resequence it, chop up things, reorder them. There's a lot of things, but just with those basic steps, this little list here that I've sort of worked through, you can come up with something that's only living on this computer. Because again, if we go back to the originals, that's what we would be listening to with both the two loops with no change. A good source material, right? Both of them, great percussion loop, great acid loop. But we've got something over here where we took that and said, okay, I'm going to use it more like a melody. And then with our percussion, let me just check, might have a double up here, I think. Yep, so we can get rid of one of those. Sorry, I realise you need that open, so a bit of resizing today. It's just because of where I put my webcam. Okay, so that's the original percussion, but now we've got and what that does straight away, as you hear it, the kick drum. So what I was speaking about a little bit earlier, about when you're doing this, we're only choosing the parts of this loop that we want. And again, there's a kick here, there's a kick here, there's a kick here, there's a kick here, and you hear the space. So if I put this loop back in, listen carefully. Because this loop itself is quite low, and all of these low hits in it, it's more of a bass kind of percussion, it's a very low percussion. They are getting in the way of the kick drum when you just leave the loop as it is in its standard form. So at the very minimum, if you were to say, okay, I want to use this with a kick drum, you might come in here to the clip. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. Let's do a duplicate of this. And on this one here, I'm going to use the clip gain like I did in the first bass. And I'm going to notch out where all the kicks live. It's going to sound quite glitchy. We can make it smaller. It would need a little bit of refinement to do this, but you could take away essentially where the kicks are. And you can also, by the way, once you get this workflow going, copy and then duplicate it. So this is rough, but that's where our kicks are. So I'd need to remove all the glitches. I might need to make it a little wider, right? But I've carved out space for the kick from that percussion loop, and listen to the difference. So this is the one with the space carved out. So let's give it another color. It's the one I just did. This is the one without that. So again, listen to the kick. Kick disappears a lot. Now it does not. That's what I'm speaking about. Okay, and then the ones that I actually did here, completely different again. The one where the pencil tool snapped to the grid and I turned down little volumes of the hits. And the one with the nice curved automation line. So a little bit of processing. We can take that audio loop in its own direction. This could be across the track. Automating that simple acid note that's just looping around. But then we can make more clips of this where it does something completely different to this clip here. And so we've got lots of opportunity to go in different directions. All right. So let's go from the basics to some more kind of advanced ideas here. So let's say for the moment, those two tracks, we're going to switch off. We've explored the envelopes and reworking them into something brand new. The kick drum we're going to keep a hold of. So let's maybe move these right over to the right. Plonk them over there. Great. So advanced. What are some things we can do? Well, one of the things that's often a bit slept on is what is called follow actions, right? Let me bring these to a little bit next door to the kick drum, and we might start with follow actions as something in the advanced area, because essentially all of these audio samples, loops, one shots I'm probably not working with so much today, but a one shot is just a hit of audio, obviously perfect for adding to a drum rack in Ableton's case and putting on the pads and playing anytime you see one shots in their drum sounds. That's great because we can build our own custom drum racks. We can also put one shots into samplers and use them to play as an instrument. So perhaps we've got a one shot that's just a chord or a lick of a guitar or something. So they are very useful, but at the moment I'm perhaps just sort of starting with loops, showing you how you can kind of turn those into your own. But perhaps as we go in the next hour here, we can also pull out some one shots. We're going to look at using audio in a simpler and sampler, so using it as a sampler as an instrument, so we can take any of this audio again and turn it into an instrument, which is just really incredible and very powerful. And then we're going to look at some other ideas. Probably won't even get all the way down to this list today, but you know, audio should be in your toolbox, should be something, as I said, a source material, and it can come from anything: dogs barking, a television show, movies. I'm just working with some stuff down here that are obvious instrument loops, but it could be anything, right? Kids in the park, nature, industrial sounds, whatever it is you're inspired by. So follow actions. I've currently got this group here. This is a demo group. Let's have a listen to what it's doing, and then let's build one of these. And let's maybe have, just for context, something from over here. You can see here, it's jumping around, having a great time, doing its very own thing over here. But it's creating, again, something completely unique. So you can use follow actions to create orderly results, and you can use it to create kind of random results. This is kind of a random result here using, again, sort of samples. So let's go and get some drums. And let's say we're going back into staying with Ableton Live, staying with Suite, staying with what comes bundled with the software, so that way it's accessible to you boys and girls as well. And let's get some grouping of beats or drum beats or something like that. These ones are cool. I like these top loops here. So let's start a brand new audio track next door to the kick track. And let's plonk all of these blissed tops and beats onto that audio track, like so. And we're going to copy a couple down as well. Let's give this a different color. I'll explain what I'm doing with those in a moment, but let's again just call this a pause. And in order for it to be a pause, what we kind of need to do is pop into the clip itself and grab the clip gain over here and bring it to inferior right at the bottom here. And you can see that's not going to make any sound. So it's just silent, right? Even when I trigger it. So we'd like to have a few of those. But actually, I'll do them one at a time so that we can kind of set it up properly. So what we want to do now is, let's say we go to the very first beat here. We want to come into this section here and we want to turn on follow action. And if, for example, everything's not collapsed, you want to be heading to the launch tab here. Okay, open up the launch tab, turn on follow action. Okay, and then we're looking at the basics of the follow action. What's going to happen when this clip is part of the follow actions? You notice, if we look back up, that the playhead has got this dotted, or sorry, not dotted, vertical lines on it now. It's been split. That shows me that that has a follow action turned on in it. As you can see, like all these clips here, including everything that's in there, they all have follow actions. So as soon as you do turn that on, as you can see, it's happening in that clip. Now, there is the possibility, let's turn it off for a second, and let's see. There's probably the possibility here of taking all the clips together, right? So I've kind of clicked the bottom one and shift selected, and I can actually come down here and in theory turn them all on at the same time. That's going to save my life. Sorry, it's not going to save my life. It's going to save my, that's funny. It's going to save my work time, right? It's efficient. So if I turn that on now, you see they've all turned on, and I can kind of copy the same action across them all. So just make sure that you've got up in the top left here 6 clips showing. That means it's happening on all 6 clips, right? So follow actions on. Great. You can see it's changed there. What do I want to do next? Well, we're going to keep it, again, tip of the iceberg, not as far down the rabbit hole as you could go. We're just going to have 1 follow action per clip, but you can actually have 2, and you can have a slider that sits in the middle or decides even that randomization between this action and this action, which is quite crazy, really. So we're just going to have 1 action, and it's going to be 100% with the slider as it is by default all the way to the left. We are going to unlink the clip. That's going to make a difference because at the moment, the follow action over here says 1 time, and as you can see, 1 times it happens. We're going to change that behavior a bit. The default is linked 1 time the follow action happens. We want unlinked, and this then opens up what we should be fairly familiar with in terms of, like, when you're looking at most clips, the length of the clip, right? This is the length, 1 bar. This would be 1 beat in the bar. etc., etc. So by doing what I was just showing you there, changing it to unlinked, we can now change exactly how much of each of those loops it plays. I don't really want 1 bar. Let's have a check and see. This is 4 bars. So most of these loops, they're all kind of a little bit different lengths. Some are 4 bar. There was one down here. This one, that's 8 bars. I want sort of a faster movement in here. I want to actually just trigger like 1 beat at a time, not like 1 whole bar and wait for that to come around. So you'll see what happens in a moment, hopefully, the reason for doing this. Shift select back here, so we're going to do it together. So we're going to go down to 0, and now we've just got 1 beat. That's what will happen per clip. Amazing. We could have 2 beats if we like. That'll be 2 quarter notes or 2/16, 2 quarter notes, I believe. Let's have a quick look. So we're sort of, yeah, we're basically saying we're going to have 1 of those or 2 of those, right? I'm going to go back to 1. So just 1 beat. Let's reset that up. Shift select, so we see all our 6 clips, so we can do it together at the same time. 1 beat. That's going to be fast. The next thing that's pretty cool is if we do 1 beat and we turn on legato, it means that when it finishes playing any beat in here, potentially, it's going to move from that position to the beat next door in another clip. So by legato, it means we're not just staying here on the same beat in every clip. It's going to play maybe, let me just stop that. It's going to play maybe this beat, and then in another new clip, it might be playing the one directly after it. And that will just continue also to randomly go around through all of the different beats in this clip and the other clips. So legato on, great move in my opinion. So I'm walking you through how to set this up. Right, so we've got legato on, 1 beat, unlinked. Quantization, it's going to follow our global tempo. That's a good idea. And 1 bar, which is also a good idea. That just means if we were triggering scenes and other clips and things, it's going to follow globally what else is going on. Pretty good idea. You can switch that off and do other funky things, but we're going to keep it like that. Velocity we're not going to worry about, as that's not tying to what we're not actually playing anything. That's relying on different velocity inputs, that particular section of the clip here. So we're not using that. So the next thing we want to do while we've got all 6 clips here is choose the action. At the moment it just says next, which means it's just going to play one, then go down to the next clip, then the next clip, then the next clip. I'd quite like that to be something else. So if you look, here are all the options of the different actions you can choose. For me, the most interesting ones are any and other. If you choose other, it will completely randomly play different clips. If you choose any, it does have the possibility, it will play any clip, but it has a possibility of repeating the same clip twice. So that's the main difference between those two. The rest kind of tell you what they're going to do. Stop the clip, play it again, the previous clip, the next clip, the first, the last, or jump even. So there are some other cool things, but I'm going to go for mainly other or any. So let's say other. Okay, and so we've got our basic follow action group here. I'm going to make some more pauses. So I'm going to duplicate that pause down a bit, about 4 times. What that's going to mean, again, is we're getting more randomizations because it's also going to play slices in here, but we're not going to hear them. So it's going to make rests between the different like beats and things that are going to be created. So we're already quite advanced down here. And if you look at my little notepad here, ignoring the yellow one, that was our demo one, we could move that away. I've kind of shown you why to unlink it. Legato also, you'll make sense in a moment when we watch a clip working. Action, any or other, as I said, that's kind of my favorite. Orderly or random is what's going to happen with the follow actions. We're going more for random here. Orderly would be something like where you would just say go next, 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 play next, 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 right? That would be an orderly move. Guess what? You can do this in MIDI as well. We're in audio and sample world today, so MIDI clips can go down with follow actions doing exactly what I'm showing you here. So again, we're opening the door, foot's in the door. You can go down this road with your MIDI clips as well, which is, again, mind-blowing. All right, 1 beat. We've chosen 1 beat. I've written here different measure. As I said, we could have 2 beats. So also, always thinking with maximum creativity, imagination. There's nothing stopping me going into one of these and making it 2 beats. That's now different to everything else is 1 beat, right? I could reverse one of these clips So we can go in here and we can now start playing again, where you start seeing me combining things that I've already shown you. So everything I've shown you so far could exist in one of these sample loops. And so it can be part of the follow action with reversing, pitch down, clip gain, preserve transients, etc., etc., etc. So I'm going to leave the reverse off for a moment. Let me also take that one that I put to 2 to 1, just so we do a walkthrough where it's kind of standard, so to speak, to start with, and then I'll start messing around with these other extra things, right? So we're just on 1 beat for now, and no reverse, no playing around with the envelope. So if we hit play now on the follow actions, we should get our first run through. And if we look inside them, let's say we pick on one, you'll see when it's at this clip's turn, it's not playing from the same point each time. You can see it's super fast, right? And in these pause ones, it's not triggering any sound, so it's giving us some nice rests as they're part of the follow action group. What about if we do this one, just to look at what's going on? Cool, right? So maybe we reverse this one. Maybe we now start like changing these around a bit. So let's have this clip reversed. Nice, so when it's its turn, we get this. Let's also make it 2 beats long. Let's also pitch it up. Let's go an octave. Let's go higher, 2 octaves. Pretty cool, right? I mean, that's just, again, giving us something that we do not have previously anywhere. And if we started again to sort of maybe add a few effects, let's say we've got a kick and a bass, we'd like to sort of cut the low end away a bit of this track. And, you know, we could go down a huge rabbit hole kind of processing this with all sorts of fun stuff, you know. But the cool thing is we've got this random loop going around here doing something really interesting, and where we take it next is up to us, really. But what I'd be inclined to do, I'm not going to go down that road, it's mainly to show you the follow actions, but if I open up a new audio track next door, let's say we stop everything for a second, let's route the follow actions in. Let's do a bit of housekeeping. Follow actions, and we want to route that into this audio track next door. It's going to listen to that. Hopefully I've picked the right one, because I've actually got 2. It wasn't so clever of me to do that, but we can call this 2 if we like, and we can make sure that we get the right one. Yep, there we go. All right, so now let's record the results of what's going on in that. Let's try that again. Just should just really just trigger the first scene, but we'll do it. Make a few changes. Let's have another loop where we pitch it up. And again, as you can see, we can just carry on with that. And those loops were beats. This could be anything, right? It could be absolutely anything really. So it could be vocals, could be your favorite bass loops, anything you like. So now we've got this percussion loop we've recorded from the follow actions. And again, I can't stress enough that pauses are kind of cool because they create rest. So what I might just show you is quickly, if we delete those pauses, I'm just going to move them somewhere else in Ableton so I don't actually delete them, but I just remove them from the follow action here. And now I make these clips just the follow action. So let's shift and select them all again. Let's open up the info tab so you can see what I'm doing. So here we are down here, close that. So now we kind of have something a bit weird here, but we can fix that. So they're now all at one beat, just because I broke the follow actions by moving the other clip over there. And let's say we also change it to any. So maybe we can have some repetitives, but now we don't get the rests that those silent audio clips bring. So it's just going to jump around between the beats now. Still interesting, still sounds cool. Because I've kept the reverse and the pitch downs and all the little things I was tweaking as we went along. But obviously the pause tracks I think are really quite interesting, the silent clips, because they give you rests in between, right? So you get kind of like some interesting patterns like you can see here. We're not just constantly with percussion, we've kind of got plenty of places where we've got silence in between. So that was the lovely recording of those top loops. We've got now our own audio loop here that again we can customize. Now we can start working in here, and maybe we are, just using a small area of it, but so you can go through, find your favorites. That kind of fits the track a little bit, this one. And now again, we can play around with all the things we're starting to get used to. So we've got a brand new loop that we can make our own. So this is what I've chosen. No effects, no processing yet, apart from the EQ that I added just to cut a bit of low end off the bottom. So you could take this as the basis of what you're next doing, and things can start getting crazy, right? So we might just want a really nice percussion loop, which is what we've got from it here, or we might go to town on it and turn it into something completely different. So just to show you, it could be the outcome of the follow actions is a traditional nice groovy percussion loop, or again, we could be using it as the basis for something else. But again, it came from a starting point where we're using audio as the source loops from sample packs, and we're totally taking them into our own domain and working with them in ways that are super original, super fun, super creative, and it's just you and your imagination. And that's where where you can go as from there to infinity and beyond. Bring these over because they do all work together. So the bass loop I changed earlier and the percussion loop I changed earlier. So if we label this up, this was the earlier percussion loop. This is the follow action result. I'm just going to put follow result. With a bit of processing, if we turn this stuff off, it's still a really nice percussion loop. The main thing we want to watch out for also with this is just to, you can hear with my ears the kick getting lost a little bit again, so just a bit of EQ on this acid bass. Nice. So that's the 3 little loops. Yeah, I'll turn my limiter off there now. I think we've got enough punch for the live stream, hopefully. By the way, if you are here in the live stream with me, do say hello. Don't be shy. Drop a hello in the chat. Let us know if you're finding this beneficial, if it's helping you imagine, learn new things in Ableton Live. If you're beginning your music production journey or you're a pro and you're looking for some inspiration, I hope it's covering both bases. So we started with this, we went basic, we've now gone a bit more advanced with the follow actions. So let's say we've covered follow actions. Let's have a look at something else then. Let's maybe do the next thing that we could potentially do with some audio loops here. Let's have spoilt for choice, really. Yeah, let's maybe do sample offset as the next kind of concept to get our head around a bit. So what we're going to do, just going to check here just what I've got going on. I will put those back on that track. If I want to reincorporate those, I just need to shift, double select, open that up. There we go. And we just can restore that. Lovely. So it's no longer broken. I broke it before when I took the pause tracks away, so we could always revisit that. Okay, sample offset. What's that all about? Okay, well, we've got a few options. Again, we're going to be looking for some audio and some loops from our sample pack. That's the goal of today, is to get you inspired and show you ways, techniques and tips and tricks of how to take audio, get away from the taboo subject of not using them, its source material, but make them your own. That's the difference, right? Is making them your own. So let's go Command F, back to our all on the browser, packs. This time, drum loops we're done, bass loops we've done. Let's have a look at things like piano, keys, pads. Maybe we'll start with pads, looking for something sort of nice and sustained. That could be interesting. Again, I am looking at the key name. I haven't given a music theory class today, but I've kind of been aware that I've been able to keep things in scale. That's quite nice. So let's maybe try this loop. So we're going to, I've set up a little rack here. So maybe what we'll do is just kind of close this up and we'll start from scratch, and I'll just go and look at that if I need to remind myself of something. But essentially what we want to begin with here is a simpler. So let's grab a simpler, put it on this track. Yeah, I didn't think about that. It's just going to replace my rack. So we'll just do a second track. And we'll drop the simpler on there. Happy days. Do I need the clip? I can copy that over, but it's just literally 1 bar of C3 with a note on it for the moment. So we'll do that from scratch. We've got a 1 bar MIDI clip here, pop a note in the middle of the piano on C3, and we're going to head to the tab of, not the launch tab anymore. We want pitch and time, and just click legato. That makes our life easier there. And then inside the simpler, we want to drop that sample that I just had, but I've kind of clicked away from it. It was this one. So it doesn't really tell us any key at this point in time. So if we needed to check the key of it, so what is the tuning of this? We could try adding a tuner after it. We know our note C3. Let's move the playhead a bit in. Ah, nice. So we did see a C pop up there in the green at some point, right? Let's just turn on loop. There it is. So that's going to fit musically pretty good with what we've got so far. So that's good news. Right, the bass line's the only thing really musically in here at this point in time anyway, and so if it doesn't fit, we can drop the bass for now, do another bass, but we're working on what we're going to do over here. So I'm going to turn loop off, put everything back how it was. I just did that to try and help myself see in the tuner. It's also very quiet, and so rather than turning the volume up of the simpler, I can right click in the side of the simpler here and choose normalize volumes, and that's going to bring all of that up to a nice level for me. So you can see my note length, 1 bar, how much of the sample it's playing, right? It's not getting through the rest of the sample. We're just only covering this area of the sample. And obviously the goal here is to do something, again, interesting with this audio loop of this pad. Now, by putting it in a simpler, it's already able to be replayed on my MIDI controller, so it's now an instrument. But of course, again, watching the tuning, right? We're happy that we're getting, when we play a C, we're getting a C. That's great news. But I need to kind of stick then to, again, notes that work within a scale where C is inside that scale. So all white notes are good in this case, and I could replay it up and down my piano. Happy days, but we're going to try something a little bit different to that. And what we're going to do is move around this sample start point. So we want this kind of thing to happen a bit like this. So when it plays through that note, it's not just going to stay only in this section, it's going to play all different parts of the clip. So how do we kind of go about that? Well, let's have a look and see if we can kind of figure that out. So let's say we grab a arpeggio and we'll pop that in front of the simpler. That should already chop that note up into whatever the rate of the arpeggio is. So it kind of is, right? It's down here. So if we move this in, but it wasn't playing through a whole bar, right? It's gated down here at 50, And even if I open the gate right up, we're not getting through much of the sample, but we are getting the rate of the arpeggio. So that's cool. So my sustained 1 bar C3 now has the rhythm of the arpeggio, right? So if I change the arpeggio style to, let's say, random, let's see what happens. Still the same behavior. So let's put it back to up, and let's make some further changes, right? Because we're not currently getting modulation of the start point, which is what we're looking for. Now, if we choose the simpler, just going to double check that my simpler workflow, when we choose the simpler, the ARP is definitely going to play a role. So I've got an option here, which I'll show you in a moment, which is using a sequencer instead of the arpeggio. So we're using a couple of MIDI effects in front of the simpler to change the rhythm of the notes or the pitch. And then I've got an LFO afterwards, which will be the thing that's going to move the sample start point around. That's in the simpler, Ableton simpler device. So let's follow that workflow. And I'm just going to check one other thing. It was only the single note. That's fine. All right. So I've got that. Okay. So let's come back over here. We've got our arpeggio, got my tuner. We don't really need that anymore. So we can close that up. Let's get an LFO. Let's pop that after the simpler. Don't forget as well that the audio that's inside the simpler here, we have all the things like the warping algorithms. We have a lot more control here by putting it inside an instrument, so we could do all sorts of shaping of it as well. But the thing we want to try and get happening here is moving this start point around here. So let's say we map the LFO to that value over there. And also, okay, let's try a sine wave for a second. So we can see the arpeggio and the LFO are now working. The arpeggio is giving us the new rate, note rate. And now we're moving through this pad and it's sounding kind of interesting, but the sine wave is kind of boring. So let's say we go for more random start playhead movements. And we're going to do that by changing the LFO to the random waveform. And we could have it in frequency like it is now. We can go faster. We also don't have to start from this point here. We could start from here. So we don't get that kind of faded volume area. And instead of frequency, we could also choose note sync. So let's have a note value. So and now let's play with the arpeggio a bit. So we've got our start head, you can see it moving around, it's moving through the sample, and we've got this ability to choose where it sometimes begins from, anywhere. But the main thing is it's not always playing from here, it's playing from all over the place because it's being controlled over here, and you can do all sorts of things as well. We can glitch it up by using jitter over here on the LFO, we can smooth it out if it's rough, we can use some of these new shapes, like also stray could be interesting. Nice. Okay, so let's change our arpeggio a bit. And let's bring in some steps. So steps are, when we use steps, we're taking the pitch up an octave sometimes, so it's breaking up that C3 and playing sometimes a C4. And we're working through different parts of the sample, and the gate is chopping off kind of the note length. Now this would be super nice to automate or use another LFO. So we could also test it out here. Open up the second page of the LFO. But you know, maybe we want more control than the same LFO settings. So if we don't I'm just changing the range slightly in here, but so I can make it unipolar or bipolar, but you know, maybe I don't want to have to live with this settings here, so I could very easily gate this with another LFO. And we could also do something nice, like go into the clip here and do some clip envelope modulation. So here it is down here, the ARP gate. It's the last thing I clicked. So we're getting something really super original here, right? As we're playing around with that. And there's all sorts of possibilities, no effects involved just yet. So we could go into the second page, change the volume envelope of the sample. Lots and lots of potential to develop this further. Beauty of putting audio in a simpler, right, into an instrument. So it's in an instrument here. We're developing it into something quite unique. We could go back to our packs, revisit. Perhaps we've set up this workflow and we're not 100% sold on that sample. Let's open up an audio track next door. Again, we do know this is C. It's working in the key of kind of whatever we had musically previously. So keeping that in mind, if we do switch it out to be something else, perhaps musically that's not going to work, but this one should work. So let's drop that in. But you know, this is a D. So again, you know, if we want to make it a C, it would be 2 semitones down. If we were playing it on our keyboard, you know, good habit to get into. Otherwise, you're relying on your ears to make sure the sample fits the rest of your project musically. Thankfully, here there's not a lot of music competition at this point in time. It's just drums and percussion at the moment. Let's go backwards to our previous loop. Really like that. Here's another one here. Could be interesting. Let's normalize it. Very nice. So we've got a little simpler workflow going on, and again, you know, it's your imagination, right? It could be anything in here. We're staying with the similar sort of sounds, but sometimes I put that empty audio track next door for when I want to kind of, you know, try out some different sounds and drop them in. But I'm not using it currently. So let's go back to the original pad. Add a little bit of processing to it. So that's the gate that's kind of also creating quite an interesting kind of rhythm to this pattern. So if we don't want that, let's copy the clip down. Let's just clear that. So it's more restrained, right? Right. Well, I mean, looking at the clock today, that's where I'm going to sort of call it a bit of a wrap. Looking at my list, this, as often is the case, there are still more things we can do here. Of course, you know, this is 20 or 30 years here of like, you know, working away at exploring all the possibilities, but hopefully, you know, what could we take away from today? What I want you to feel is like there shouldn't be a taboo about using, you know, samples and audio. The focus is to kind of try and learn ways and techniques, which I'm trying to show you here inside of Ableton Live, where you can make them your own with some just simple adjustments versus adjustments that can go very far with creativity and imagination, you know, and suddenly you have something that's unique on your computer. So everything here today, apart from the kick drum and the MIDI there, is only on my computer. And it started with something that was inside of Ableton Live Suite, inside the packs, grab some audio from there, a bass loop, percussion, and now a pad. And we've said, okay, let's use, again, native Ableton Live tools and turn them into something that's unique, that we can work with in our track. And as I said, literally, we're at tip of the iceberg, because again, I could now record that track that's playing there with that pad sound in it and the ARP and the LFO, record that out, and then we've got our own brand new audio loop, and maybe start again, or you know, work with some of the tools that we already looked at. There's no effects added to it at this point in time. So hopefully you see the potential for going far. If you enjoyed this series, let's say it's a series of working with audio, perhaps let me know in the comments and I'll fire up a part B where I kind of go into the stuff that I didn't get to today. I'd be interested to know, did you find this useful, beneficial, interesting? You know, is it helping you, inspire you, you know, to fire up Ableton Live and go and make some music? I hope so. So I will add a video at the end here like I normally do, something that I really recommend watching from one of my previous live streams that will tie into this. So do keep an eye out for that. Obviously, I have to wait a little moment for the stream to be uploaded and Ableton to, sorry, YouTube to check it through. But once that's done, I'll pop an end card there to a video within the series of videos I've been doing on the live stream saying, check this out if you're enjoying this, because there'll be things connected to that related to sound design and working with audio. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, much appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, let your mates know if you think they would find it interesting as well and they'll learn something from it. And I wish you an awesome rest of your weekend. Happy creating music production, and I will catch you guys and girls in the following week's Sunday Fun Day live stream. Take care of yourself. Ciao for now. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Bye bye. Ciao.